Argentine court denies Bishop Zanchetta's appeal. This was a personal friend of Pope Francis. Looks like they denied his appeal in a court case. An Argentine court has rejected an appeal by Bishop Gustavo Oscar Zanchetta, who was convicted in 2022 of sexual abuse of seminarians. After being sentenced to a prison term of 4.5 years, Bishop Zanchetta was allowed to live under house arrest in Argentina. But in November of 2024, he received court permission to travel to Rome for medical treatment and remains there. Despite his conviction, he remains a good bishop, a bishop in good standing, which to my question is why? Okay, if he's been convicted in a court of law, there's no reason, to my knowledge, that he should be a bishop in good standing. It seems that he needs to be removed. Friend of the Pope or not, one needs to be removed. Bishop Zanchetta resigned his post in the Oran Diocese in 2017, citing health reasons. I think he needs to be laicized. He was brought to Rome by Pope Francis, who created a new position in the Roman Curia for him. He eventually returned to Argentina to face criminal charges, but his case and the Vatican's readiness to shelter him, it says, causes a major scandal. Someone like this needs to be laicized, not a bishop in good standing. We saw in the case of McCarrick the problems in failing to discipline him swiftly. Eventually he was laicized, but to this day he hasn't actually faced any consequences beyond that for various reasons. In this particular case, I don't know why he's a bishop in good standing and hasn't been laicized. I think this sends the wrong message, especially in an age where there are already problems surrounding the question of why hasn't Rupnik been swiftly dealt with. The Rupnik case is still ongoing, unfortunately. Check out this article. Rupnik case casts shadow on Vatican's commitment to fight abuse. In cases like the one we just saw, doesn't help with this one. In a busy news week, people may have missed the Vatican stating it has concluded the process of gathering information in the case of Father Marco Rupnik. So, concluded the process of gathering info. A former Jesuit accused by several women of abusing them when they were adults from the mid-1980s until at least the 2010s. The case against Rupnik has been taking a very long time, especially considering the Vatican had already decided there was a case to answer, but declined to prosecute originally, citing the statute of limitations, which Pope Francis, to his credit, lifted and decided to open the case. Rupnik was expelled from the Jesuit order in 2023 for disobedience rather than for his alleged crimes, which had been declared beyond the statute of limitations, and was subsequently allowed to join a diocese in his native Slovenia and remain a priest in good standing. Well, let that sink in. We know he was guilty. He was excommunicated. The excommunication was removed and then sent to another place to continue his ministry. Let that sink in. Again, to Pope Francis, his credit, he lifted the statute of limitations to open up the case. However, the problem with that is it's been forever. They've been looking into this way too long. This should have been dealt with swiftly, and yet it wasn't. And so we have to ask the question, why is it taking so long? When people found out about the development, there was a massive outcry, and Francis ordered Rupnik's case to be reopened and re-examined. We are now working to establish an independent tribunal that will move on to the final phase through a criminal judicial process. In cases like this, it is important to find the most suitable people and for them to accept Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, told Madrid's Archdiocesan Weekly Alpha and Omega on Thursday. The Rupnik case is very high profile because his massive mosaics are featured in famous church buildings all around the world. Sadly, to the Church of Shame, because his artwork is trash anyway. He is accused of psychologically, spiritually, and sexually abusing dozens of victims, many of them women religious, using his sexual acts as as inspiration for his artwork. Another reason why his artwork needs to be taken down. After the outrage, Pope Francis ordered a review of the Rupnik case. Again, to Pope Francis's credit. However, Fernandez told Alpha and Omega his office, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of Faith, is dealing with more serious cases that are less publicized. I don't know. That comes across really poorly, with all due respect, Fernandez. That may not have been the best way to respond to the delay here. Makes it sound like this case isn't as serious, and it downplays the problems surrounding this. Of course, this brings up a century-old legal maxim: justice must not only be done, but must also be seen to be done. This was made by the Lord Chief Justice of England in 1924. The statement was made in a case where one of the people working for the court could have been therefore seen as biased. To some of his other cases, he was never actually accused of bias, but the mere appearance of bias was enough to get the case thrown out. Which brings us to Rupnik. The Slovenian priest has close connections with several high-ranking Vatican officials going back to John Paul II, who himself had failed, unfortunately, to deal with the case of cardinal law sufficiently. Rupnik decorated most of the Redemptoris Mater Chapel of the Apostolic Palace in the Vatican in 1990s under John Paul. The chapel is reserved for the exclusive use of the pontiff, although it is often used by the preacher of the papal household for preaching to Vatican officials. He also designed the logo for the Year of Mercy in 2016, which was an absolutely terrible logo. I don't know why in the world that was even chosen, which was the special jubilee set up by Pope Francis. His artwork is still used by Vatican media website, which is a scandal in and of itself, and it sends the wrong message. The head of the Vatican's Dicastery for Communication, Italian layman Paolo Ruffini, recently sparked controversy for defending his office's continued use of this artwork by saying, "Who am I to judge the Rupnik stories?" Again, sends the wrong message. Meanwhile, Govekar, who leads the Department for Theology and Pastoral Activity in the Vatican's Communication Dicastery, is a member of Rupnik's Centro Aletti. Rupnik and his Centro Aletti art studio in Rome have been commissioned to produce art at numerous prominent places of worship around the world, including the St. John Paul II National Shrine in Washington, D.C., Sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes, and the Sanctuary of Fatima. American Cardinal O'Malley has urged the Vatican to remove its artwork by Rupnik, saying, "It's really ugly." No, that's not what he said. "We must avoid sending a message that the Holy See is oblivious to the psychological distress that so many are suffering." Also a valid point. Also, it's really ugly. This call by the Vatican's leading figure on battling abuse was made last June, but Rupnik and Rupnik studio art is still being used by the Vatican. In fact, a recent video of Pope Francis speaking to Christians in Gaza via the internet shows a work of art by the accused priest hanging in the Pope's room. Not a good message. Not a good message. It's like so tone deaf. They are so tone deaf. It's absolutely just mind-boggling how tone deaf everyone in the Vatican is. In general, the situation could cause observers to raise their eyebrows when the head of the DDF implies Rupnik isn't one of his more serious cases. A Vatican investigation of a priest who had been prominently featured by the Vatican for decades is always going to be looked at critically. Justice must not only be done, but must also be seen to be done. The Vatican seems to be ignoring this maxim. Hey, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button, and if you want to support the channel, visit patreon.com/Reason and Theology.